All right. So, ready?
Episode 41. Here we come.
Here we go. Hey, welcome back to Foxhole Symphony podcast. I'm Sarge, your co-host here with my good friend Mark.
I'm Mark.
How are you, bro?
Good, man. It's good to see you.
Good to see you again, too.
Soggy day in New Jersey.
It is. It's soggy. The storms have swept in these last few days, and, I barely made it into the studio. I was like, I got out of my car. I needed a kayak to get to the door. It was...
and Red leaps off.
Yeah.
Leaps off the porch at you.
And went flying. He slid down the stairs.
Red is the loving corgi here in the Vesper household.
Yeah. So it's good to be in a foxhole today.
Amen.
Because it's wet out there.
Well, and it's interesting you say that because I've told this story before, but foxholes are messy. There's always water in the bottom of a foxhole. It's almost impossible to keep that inch of. It's nasty.
Ick.
And it's a metaphor for life, isn't it? It's just kind of the mud and muck that we find ourselves in, where you have a brother to pull you out. Hard to climb out yourself sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And we've got one of those brothers with us today that we're really excited to introduce to our guests. And so his name is Jeff Andrechyn. And Jeff's from the South, not the deep South, not the deep South. Actually, there's some connections, I think, to the Northeast as well, which I'm sure he'll tell us about. But Jeff, welcome to the Foxhole. It's good to have you on today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be with you guys. I've been listening to you for how long now? So just to be able to be on the same line with you is great. But listen, Sarge, I got to tell you, I'm actually from New Jersey. I was born and raised there.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
really
right.
17 years. And, when you're down south, people say, hey, could any good thing come out of Jersey? And I say, yeah.
Wait a minute. That's Nazareth.
It's possible, That's not Jersey. It's possible, So here I am in Virginia, a Yankee fan. And you've got to be brave.
We like you.
Wear a Yankee hat in Virginia. You've got to be brave.
Oh, absolutely.
What was your base here for 17 years? Where?
So I was born in Elizabeth, and I was raised in Colonia, which is in Woodbridge Township.
Oh, I'm a Roselle. I was born and raised in Jersey City, but I moved out of there at 6. I spent the next 16 years in Roselle.
Yeah. People ask me what it was like to grow up in Jersey, and I tell them, well, I could remember being in kindergarten, and the teacher says to the kid next to me, what comes after a sentence? And the kid says, an appeal. It is a little rough. It is a little rough around the edges at times, but you learn how to run fast in that town.
That's great.
You do. That's exactly right. Oh, it's priceless.
Now at 17, did you know the Berg, the Italian section of Elizabeth? Does that resonate with you? No. Okay.
No.
That's where my friends used to hang. The great restaurants were in the Berg.
Well, it's always the Berg, right? And you say the Berg, I think of Chambersburg, the area of the little Italian area of Trenton.
Yeah.
Anyway,
tough neighborhood, Chambersburg.
Yeah.
I was profoundly affected by the Italians, though, growing up there. You can't help it.
It's so awesome. So now you're in Virginia. And what part? You're right there along like Skyline Drive, right?
Yeah. So we could look up at the mountain right behind my house here, and I'm within 5 miles from Skyline Drive. So we are in a garden spot in Virginia.
The Blue Ridge?
That is right next to Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's home. And so we're kind of students of Jefferson down here. We hold these truths to be sacred, self-evident. And so we're in just a beautiful area down here.
Wow. Interestingly, I didn't know that, Jeff, but my wife and I had a really detailed conversation last Sunday after church about Thomas Jefferson's wives and slaves and kids and lineage and all details you probably know a lot about that I didn't. But my wife opened my eyes to the more current stories about his kids and slaves that he had kids with and things like that. It was I love history as well. We're big Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, Civil War, the whole thing.
So Sally Hemings, you're probably talking about, right?
Yes.
So that was one of his slaves. And the thing about it was when his wife died, Martha, he absolutely loved and adored her. At that point, they had 6 kids. And when she died after childbirth, he promised her on her deathbed that he would not remarry. because she didn't want her kids raised by sort of an evil stepmother. And so anyway, he inherited all these slaves from Martha's father.
Yep.
And Martha's father actually had an affair with one of his slaves,
Yep.
and it was Hemmings, right? So when Jefferson gets Sally Hemmings on his property, she is actually the half sister of his wife Martha.
Right. Right.
They had the same father. And so Sally could have looked just like Martha, his wife whom he loved,
Wow.
which is really interesting. That's sort of like the story nobody really knows about.
Wow.
Pretty,
Cool. Thank you.
Pretty wild.
Yep.
Pretty wild. So for those that may have not figured it out yet, Jeff is a historian, a true historian, and even does, I think, still does tours down there, right? At
Monticello?
Monticello?
Yeah. Only on special request at this point.
Got it.
So,
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
So my story is airline pilot. I was captain for American Airlines, and I was doing that thing right up until COVID hit, and I was 62 in 2020 when all of a sudden they had to shut down the airline because nobody was flying, and so they were looking to shed some of their salaries, and they offered an early out package to the pilots.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted guys that were 64 to go first. If they couldn't get that, they'd go to 63, and last resort they'd go to 62. And the package was amazing because it was 60% of your pay and all the benefits.
Wow.
And so I'm sitting there looking at this opportunity, and I'm like, okay, hold it. You guys are going to pay me to go camping for the next 3 years.
That's right.
I mean, that's what I wanted to do, right? So, I put my hand up, and they took 616 guys. I was number 559 processed, and I found out in the morning of my last flight that was it, and walked away from the airline. Immediately, we bought an Airstream. My wife says I have a thing for metal tubes.
Yeah, exactly. You do, I guess.
And then we just started traveling the country in the Airstream. And what was beautiful was I just kind of let the storm of COVID push me out, and it was like going out into Salem in the sense of peaceful waters. We just rented old movies. We got off the grid and read the classics, and just traveled the country to these state parks. And 2020, 2021 were probably some of the best years of my life.
That's great.
It sounds amazing.
It was fantastic. And then as I was turning 65 and my paycheck was going to stop, I put an application in. I thought, okay, what would I want to do if I had to go back to flying? And I thought about going to Samaritan's Purse. So Samaritan's Purse bought a 757 and needed the captain for it. And I thought, how cool that would be just to fly missions the rest of your life in a 757. So if the tornadoes hit in Kentucky, you're flying supplies in, right?
Sure.
And I thought, oh, man, traveling around the world. So I applied for the job, 757 captain, and I was down to probably, there were a handful of guys left in the pool. And the airplane never got online. I think they got it from overseas. They put it into maintenance, and they found out it was probably they had to do a lot more work to it than they thought.
Okay.
And so they didn't really need anybody right away. But my resume, and somebody up here in Charlottesville, Virginia, got my resume and asked me to come fly for them. So I'm flying for a wealthy family here in Charlottesville in a little business jet going all around the world. I'm going to places that were on my bucket list to go and enjoy, and I'm just flying this wealthy family around to all these places.
What an incredible gift and opportunity and retirement. My goodness. I mean, how cool. Now, does your wife get to travel at all with you?
No. If I was someplace for a while, she could commercial in, but they've never asked, hey, why don't you bring your wife on this one?
Got it.
So. No, I'm pretty much on my own. Okay.
Yeah, and I know you're fresh off a trip back from London, and so you know we're thankful that and man, you've got like if I were fresh off a trip from London, and Mark will attest to this, I would not sound nearly as energetic as Jeff right now. I would be like, my head.
He just had a cup of coffee.
Yeah, I know, but my head, I would have like 16 cups of coffee. My head would be bumping into the microphone. I'd be like, can we just do this tomorrow? I can't.
Yeah.
So
I'll tell you, as a historian, going to London though was awesome. You know, it's so big. You got the Tower of London. You've got, you know, the London Bridge. You've got the Eye. You've got Parliament. There were so many cool things to see in London. But one of the things I got to tell you I saw was I went to the Imperial War Museum, and there stood probably 60 feet tall a V-2 rocket. And so these were the rockets that this guy von Braun in Germany was putting together during the war, and they were terrorizing London at the time. And so they weren't very accurate. They weren't killing a lot of people, but they definitely terrorized
They were
London.
scaring the daylights out of people. Yeah,
I had never seen a V-2 before in my life, and I walk into this museum, and there's one sitting there. And so here's the backstory on this. This guy von Braun grows up in Germany, and he loves rocketry, and he wants to go to the moon. And when Hitler hears about his technology, he employs him to make these V-2 rockets, not to go to the moon, obviously, but to bomb the enemy, right? And so they're practicing on London, but really what Hitler wants to do is he wants these V-2 rockets to go all the way to Boston, New York, and Washington. And he wants those cities to be burning like his cities are in Germany. And so von Braun wants to go to the moon, but now he's got the funding to start building these rockets, so he does it. And so as the end of the war is happening, this technology is really important. And so von Braun knows that the Russians are coming from the east, but the U.S. is coming from the west, and he would much rather go to the U.S. with this technology than to go with the east and the Russians, because the West at least believed in the Bible. He thought they got to be better people. And so he takes this technology and he comes to the United States with it. But Eisenhower's the president, and von Braun was actually SS. And so he does not trust the SS. So the technology doesn't really go anywhere under Eisenhower, but it waiting in the wings is JFK. And JFK grows up reading Jules Verne, From the Earth to the Moon, and with this idea that it's possible that we can go to the moon. And so when Kennedy becomes president, he meets von Braun, and it's a match made in heaven. And immediately Kennedy makes von Braun head over NASA. And von Braun takes that technology and eventually builds the Saturn V. Wow. and then takes us to the moon.
Yep.
Right. So cool.
And so, okay, so it's this amazing story of what was really at one point the worst thing that could happen. You know, these bombs hitting London took us to probably the highest point our nation had ever been to at that point. You know, because once those guys got up to, were able to look back and go, oh my gosh, they thought they were going up there to see the moon. But when they saw the Earth rise for the first time, they saw our blue orb in space, and it was like the only thing that was in color in the universe.
That's right.
It was it took their breath away to look back at the Earth, you know. And so the thing about it is, you know, what could be the worst thing that could happen in the world would be the killing of God, right? Nothing could be worse. But, you know, the killing of God actually turned out to be the salvation of the world. And on the cross, Jesus changed everything, because the very worst things in life actually have the possibility of becoming the very best things in life.
Absolutely. It's a beautiful, beautiful story and a beautiful reality. So true, right? And we need to be reminded of that. I need to be reminded of that over and over and over again.
By the way, I'm going to bring out my incredibly cynical side and note that those guys who saw that blue orb for the first time, amazing what can happen in just a big accident, you know, a big explosion, and boop, there it is, a blue orb, right? Just and it's one of the things that make you a creationist, which I am in my heart, is like, come on.
Mhm.
Right.
You get a moonside view of the Earth for the first time. You're just not thinking about a Big Bang.
Right.
Right. Right.
Don't get me
They
off on
saw
that tangent too far, but come on.
they saw the miracle of the earth.
Yeah.
There's just no way this could happen apart from God.
Yeah. That's right.
And to quote him,
Yeah.
and it was good.
Yes. So Jeff, you know, you've listened to some of the Foxhole Symphony episodes, and as you have, you know, I'm curious to know like what's resonated with you. I mean, you know, so here you are, you know, 65 years, right? And you know, on this earth and involved in lots of men's ministry, I presume, which we're going to get to a little bit, but. You know, what's most resonated with you as you've listened to the Foxhole that, you know, kind of just taps you on the shoulder or gets you excited?
Well, I just love listening to the guys that you bring on there, because everybody brings on something that I don't know yet, you know, and so they're gonna tell me of their experience, and I'm gonna learn from them. So I've really enjoyed the guys, but I like the conversation. You know, the last one I listened to, you guys were talking about walking with the Holy Spirit,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm always curious about how guys are doing that. How are you actually hearing from God? And but what I most like is you guys out there going after men. And how needed that is today. Because if there's ever a group that needed somebody to come rescue them, it would be a couple of elders like you guys going after men in your community.
We'll appreciate that, and you know, I'm curious. So, like, what you know, what's your foxhole like? You know, tell us a little bit about your foxholes and kind of you know what's going on and who's in it and what's that look like for you.
Okay, so I actually lived in Charlottesville, Virginia, prior to going to Charlotte and finishing up with American Airlines. So I was here for 17 years. And so I was flying captain at the time for U.S. Airways, and I was raising kids. And I had a great time here in Charlottesville doing that. And so what I was kind of known for, obviously, was I was a pilot. But the other thing was I was this great dad who took his kids around the world, and we're always doing some sort of adventure. Okay. And then one day I turned on my computer and I'm looking at it in the morning, and I can't see half the computer. I had a vision, some sort of scotoma in my vision. And so long story short, that's a line item veto for the FAA. You have a vision problem, you're done. You know, and so all of a sudden I found myself on medical from work, and almost at the same time, my daughter was in high school, and she started to go through a little dark tunnel, and her grades were falling apart, and you know, we suspect all kinds of things are going on with her friends out there, and so we confronted her on finding some alcohol under her bed. And she ran away that night, and so we found her on her way to Mexico, and we had to bring her up and we put her into a therapeutic boarding school. Okay. And so what's interesting about this story is that what I was known for, now I'm about 48 years old, I'm known as an airline pilot and a great dad, and both of those were gone in like instantly. You know, it was like the Great Descent. You know, it was like what we were talking about. Some of the worst things that could happen happened, and all of a sudden, I found myself on a new path, a new journey. And so that's what often a tragedy or storm can bring into your life. And we had been going out to Wild at Heart and looking at these conferences. And so now that I'm out of work, I took that message to our church. And we started gathering with men, and I think we had the same explosion you guys are having up there. You know, whereas you expect 5 guys to show up at a meeting, 40 guys are showing up. And we bring this message from Wild at Heart, and all of a sudden this thing blossoms into a citywide movement in Charlottesville. And we're a couple of guys, you know, trying to figure out what to do with it, you know, and all these men. And we had a blast doing it. And what I'd like to say about this is that we always think that the guy that's the leader, you know, has been seminar qualified and is a real student of God and has his life pretty much all together. And the Lord loves to give away broken leaders, guys that, you know, have gone through the gauntlet of life and have experienced not only success but also failure. And so we got this group together, and we called this the Cave of Adullam, the cave for short. So David is on the run from Saul, and he holds up in this Cave of Adullam, and 400 guys joined themselves to David, and they were in debt, depressed, and generally discontented. And I'm like, guys, that's us, you know. So,
Love it.
Yeah, that's us. So we called ourselves the Cave, and we transformed our relationship with God and each other in the cave, because we put the chairs in a circle and we started telling our stories, and we just opened up the kimono, metaphorically, you know, and we got real in there, and the guys just they're like, holy crap, you know, you're going through that too? Well, I am too, but they never knew it, you know? So there were guys in church that were sitting there for 5, 10, 15 years, had no idea the story of the guy sitting next to them.
Right.
And so we opened up our stories, and it was really a lot of fun. So I'm back in this town now where all that happened. And so our meeting life is vibrant, you know, but so I circle up with a number of men's groups, and and also dinner groups with my wife and that sort of thing. So
the cave. So you started out with the cave, and is this meeting in somebody's home?
Actually, we met in the annex to a church.
Okay.
And so that's where those meetings took place. But then what we did was we had the guys break up into groups of 10, and we called them a wave, and we numbered the waves. And so eventually we had a church within a church, because we had, 60 guys, and then each of them are in a group. And so we had all these waves. And so we're really kind of running, we were running a pretty big operation at the time.
Amazing. So what's sort of current day status of the cave and the waves, or, you know, or have you kind of moved on from that and doing something different?
Well, you know, what we did was, what I noticed when we started working with the guys is, if there's 3 big mysteries in life, you know, who is God really? Who are you really? And why are you here? Mm-hmm. And when we looked at those, the guys had some idea of who God was, but they really had no idea of who they were. Mm-hmm. And so I got Gary Barkalow to come out from Ransom Heart to do a retreat, a calling retreat, helping men find out who they are. And when Gary came out and we did the retreat, we had so much fun doing it. And Gary at the time was leaving Ransom Heart and needed somebody to do these retreats with. And so I left all that behind, and I started running the country with Gary Barkalow, doing these calling retreats with men.
Wow.
And so that was a lot of fun, you know, to be able to run with an expert, you know, for a while. And we actually did them around the world together.
Incredible. Yeah. Incredible.
Yeah.
How cool. So just to kind of keep tabs on your story a little bit, you know, what happened with your daughter and your career?
Yeah. So I had to send my daughter to a therapeutic boarding school, and if she had a knife, she would have killed us right there for sending her up there. You know, I mean, it was a traumatic situation at the time. And then about 3 months later, we got a letter from her going, "Hey guys, I think you saved my life here." You know, and we just totally got her out of her situation. And she graduated a scholar athlete from that school, and then came back and was a flight attendant at American Airlines, and we actually got to fly together.
Oh, wow.
And it's a great story. And we're best friends, because we could talk shop together. We talk almost every day now, you know. And so, but it took me about 10 years to get back to the airlines. I was having so much fun doing the men's ministry, I completely forgot about my job. And then, you know what it's like doing men's ministry, and you're doing it full time. You run out of money real quick, right? So I remember my wife sitting me down and going, "Hey man, hey Bucko, do you want to go back to work or not? You know, because if you are, you need to, you know, check back in with these guys."
Right.
And So they offered me a deal I couldn't refuse, and I went back to work about 10 years ago at American.
Okay. Wow, what a beautifully redemptive story.
Oh yeah,
That is awesome.
yeah.
So good, so good.
But what I wanted to say is, we talk about what it's like with working with men in, hey, what do you do when you get these guys?
Yep.
And I just wanted to open up a little bit about what we do with the guys when we get them.
Please.
And so we, in order to orient them, we open up story, desire, and journey. And I just want to talk about each one for just a second, okay?
Sure.
So often guys have never really told their story. Not only have they not told it, they haven't really thought about it that well. And so, here's what's interesting. Have you ever seen Jay Leno go out on the sidewalk moments, and he takes his mic out there, and he sticks his mic in front of somebody's face, and he goes, "Hey, who fought in the Civil War?"
Yep.
Crickets, right?
Yep.
Sometimes they give it away. Hey, when was the War of 1812?
Right.
Right? Nothing. Right?
Nothing.
Who's buried in Grant's tomb? Yeah.
Who's buried in Grant's tomb? Right? Nobody knows. Right? And so I'm sitting there on the other end of the line, rooting for him, trying to yell out the answer. But the truth of it is, my heart breaks because they don't know what story they're living in.
Mm-hmm.
What if evil wasn't? We have a tendency to look at evil as like Putin right now, bombing these innocent people in the Ukraine. We have a tendency to look at evil as the school shooter in Nashville, right?
Yeah.
What if evil was you walking around disoriented, not knowing the story you're living in?
Mm.
What if evil was much more pervasive than those big ticket items, And so
personal, yeah.
So what we're trying to do is open up their story, and they have to tell their story over the weekend. So it takes them, about 2 weeks to put it all together. So we're going to say, hey, listen, from 1 to 10, we want to know what your influences were, what happened. 10 through 20, what happened. 20 through 30, what happened. And the important thing is to go, hey, listen, those first 10 years are amazingly important. Do not overlook them, because so often your calling is in its purest form when you're 10 years old. That's when you know what you really want to do sometimes.
Sure.
And so for me, when I was 10, my dad was flying for an operation called Slick Airways, and they were taking supplies into Vietnam for our soldiers. And so we're in a 4-engine Constellation, and we go over to Vietnam, and the navigator would take me up to shoot the stars, and we'd go back and we'd look up, and he'd look up at all the stars, and he'd show me the stars, and then we'd go and we would plot on a chart where we were going over the Pacific, right? And if you've ever seen a sunset from the Pacific at altitude, the Constellation is probably one of the most beautiful things you'd ever want to see in the world. And then I would run in the back of the airplane, and there were the body of our soldiers we were taking back home.
Wow.
They were in their coffins. And so at 10 years old, I knew the world was at war, and it was a beautiful place, but it was at war, And so that's how that story has played itself out in my life all along, because if you don't understand that story, that we're at war, you're going to make some really bad assumptions about who God is.
Right.
So story becomes really important.
Sure. Yeah. And then desire and journey.
Okay. So for desire, in Philippians, it says, for God is working in you, giving you the desire and the power to do what pleases him. So, we know what bad desires are. You don't have to teach guys that, they already know that,
Sure.
And so what we're looking for are, what are the good desires that God has given you?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of guys don't even know they have permission to talk about their own desires. We're so given to doing what we should do, and we don't do what we want to do. And the good thing about desire is that what you're to do next is what you most want to do. Okay, it's God given. It's in there. Sometimes it's just crushed by the world and circumstances, but it's in there. So how do you recover desire in a guy? Really takes a group of experts kind of looking at your life, right? And I'll give you an example. So the airline is shutting down during COVID, we were talking about. And I'm going to pull the plug here and put my name in the hat to leave, but I'm killing it financially. I mean, I am just finally making some money where my retirement won't look like an embarrassment, right? And so I'm making all this money, but now I'm going to leave, and I'm really kind of distraught. Like, okay, Lord, should I go or should I stay? Should I go or should I stay? And I hear as clear from God as possible, you can't make a mistake. I'm not going to let you make a mistake. And I'm like, well, then I'm going to do what I want to do. And I want to go camping. And
that was easy.
And yeah, that was easy, right? So I want to go camping. So I did it, and it just turned out to be amazing couple of years, So sort of this idea of getting back to what God has placed in you is critical in this orientation and where to go and what to do next in your life.
Sure.
And then we open up journey in the sense that, God says to Abraham, our forefather in the faith, he says, hey, get thee out of thy father's house. Let's go. We're going on a journey. I'm not putting you in a classroom. I'm putting you out there in the wilderness, And what God does in that moment is he robs Abraham of predictability. Yeah. I like the quote, the opposite of faith isn't rebellion. The opposite of faith is predictability. And that's an interesting thought, but this idea of kind of going out into the unknown with God really causes you to be completely dependent upon him. So down here in Charlottesville, we love the Lewis and Clark expedition. And these were guys who went out beyond their maps, right?
Sure.
As they were going to cross the country, they had no idea what was out there. They knew about St. Louis and they knew about the Pacific coast, but they had no idea what was going on in between there. And so Thomas Jefferson takes Meriwether Lewis out and teaches him how to shoot his longitude by looking at the moons going around Jupiter. And when they did that, they hit their longitude within about 50 miles of where they actually were. So it was a really accurate way. And the idea, the metaphor is how do we go celestial, and how do we navigate this journey by looking at it at another realm? And that's, of course, why I enjoyed your podcast last week about hearing from God. So
yeah, and
just a couple. Go ahead.
No, it's great, and I love how you just even touched on, as I think you were talking about desire, that it requires other people in your life, right? It requires people facilitating, encouraging, asking good questions, hard questions, to pull out of us sometimes. You said actually, we don't even sometimes give ourselves permission, right? To look at the good desires, right, that God put in our hearts. They're foreign to us sometimes. And, we've found a lot. It's interesting. When you were talking about story, I was thinking about what you did recently this year in Band of Brothers. You're like, we're just going to tell our stories. Here's a bunch of guys that have been traveling together and doing life together, but you start to look around and go, wow, do I really know his story? I don't know that I do. And I know that was a really impactful season at Band of Brothers.
It was, and we did that for months, and it's faded a little bit because the guys who are regular attenders have told their stories.
Right.
But the depth of those stories and the new learnings were incredible. I love the human story. I want to hear what you've got to say, because I'm knowing some of these men really well. You realize we all modify our stories, and depending who our audience is. So there's just a lot of layers there.
Absolutely.
A lot of layers of, my goal in my heart is I'm praying for this person who's going to tell their story a week in advance, I'm just like, Lord, let him bring it. Let him bring it. Because we all know, the three of us know what it's like when a guy is on this journey and they, like John Maswera did, and Jeff, you won't probably know who that is, but one of our earlier episodes, we had a guy show up here and just rocked our world.
Laid it out.
As evidenced by the fact that we had 700 downloads for his episode. So, and that's it. That's what I want to happen. But it was a great time to let these men tell whatever they wanted to tell. Yeah. They had complete license to just go.
Yeah.
Some of them were focused on their childhoods. Others stayed in their jobs. And it's interesting how we see ourselves in the mirror.
Yeah.
You know, or what we want other people to see of us.
Yeah. But, and like Jeff said, over the course of a weekend, an intensive weekend, you know, where there's time to focus on these different stages of our lives. Yeah. And, again, not only telling the story, but answering questions about it and then leading into desire. And I think that's a really key component. Like how often do most of us feel like we just need to do what we need to do? You got to do what you got to do.
Yeah. Right.
Rather than what you actually want to do.
Right. That becomes 90% of life for guys. They're all doing what they should do.
Yep.
Not necessarily what they want to do. And if you continue to do that, it's going to be tough.
Yeah. Agreed. I remember Haynes saying something like that. I wanted to ask you something about the journey. It's because some reading I did and other conversations I've had, and I'm certainly not speaking for all men, but what I read and what I've investigated a little is the nature of the modern man, let's call it the 21st century man, when we tend to either get paralyzed or grossly apathetic because we don't know what to do. We say, what do I do? And what I learned was it's the wrong question that we're asking. It should be, what do I do next?
Right.
Right. Amen. And that's what I feel like that's my calling. My calling is to help men in transition. So they're not going to call me in if a guy needs to be comforted or encouraged. I get called in when he needs to make a transition. He needs to go from one job to the next, from one stage of his life to the next. And often I get called in when his life is falling apart. Okay, because that's when really good things can happen. I'm not really looking for the guy that's got it all together. I'm all for him. If everything's going well, that's fantastic. I start to get really interested in the guy's life when it starts to fall apart, because all great moves into the second half of life start with a descent.
Yeah.
You know, hey, there goes the airline pilot. There goes the great dad. Okay, now let's make something of this man. And so we grow up spending 20 years learning the law, and the rest of our lives are spent getting rid of the law, you know, and now walking with God. And so this is the idea is union with God. And so we have to drop some of our preconceptions of what life is supposed to look like, because we've been asking, just like you said, Mark, for the first 20 years, what do I do? Right. Most of your 20-year-olds in church are looking at the pastor, taking notes about what I should do. They're just notes on the page. And sometimes those precepts can work, but where I come in is when those precepts stop working. And now I go, okay, now we have this further journey. Now we need to hook you up like the Lewis and Clark journey and go celestial. Okay, so I just want to read a few verses here. Because you are from another realm, your citizenship is also in that realm. Philippians 3:20. Ephesians 2:6 says, and he has raised us up together and made us to sit in heavenly places in Christ. We are heavenly beings because we were born in the heavens, and the most important part of your spirit was born and remains in another realm. Okay, so how do we take a guy that is notes on the page, his head is buried in this life, and now transfer that and say, hey, listen, you are now a citizen of another realm. And in order to find your way across no man's land, you're going to have to go and reach the heavens. You're going to have to get your downloads from heaven. Okay. I'm going to give you a perfect example. I'm flying a 737. It's an older 737, and we have what they call an FMS, and we have a great flight guidance system, and it's all wonderful, right? But it uses all ground-based equipment in order for us to navigate. So it triangulates off of all these what they call VORs, which are established on the Earth. They're instruments from the FAA. Well, when I transitioned from the 737 to the Airbus, they had what they call GPS. So now I can get everything downloaded from above. And so you can fly with GPS and FMS, ground-based equipment, but there are certain approaches that you actually shoot that are so winding through the mountain range that you have to deselect the ground-based equipment to go celestial and to get a download from your GPS. And so when I would get on these approaches, the co-pilot would say, hey, you want me to, part of the procedure was we now disconnect the ground-based equipment and we go celestial. And I would always go, nope, I'm fine keeping the ground-based equipment. I've been doing it all my life. It's never let me down. And so I never did it because I was afraid to go celestial. And so one day I had to shoot this one particular approach. It's called an RMP approach, and it's so winding through the mountains that if I didn't disconnect the ground-based equipment, I was jeopardizing the safety of the flight. And so I was forced to hit that button and disconnect the ground-based equipment and to go celestial. And when I did it, all of a sudden I saw I had 14 satellites navigating me to within a hair's breadth of accuracy. I mean, I was dead on. So in other words, going celestial was far more accurate than the ground-based equipment.
Sure.
And so that's the real test, because it's kind of scary to, listen to God, fall in the hands of the living God, right?
Yep.
To be completely dependent upon God. And that's what the frontier, of course, forces you to do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Couple good life metaphors in there.
Oh, 100%.
Go celestial.
For sure. Yeah. For sure. Yeah. Man, so many thoughts. I appreciate you sharing all that. For the sake of time, I want to get a sense of, kind of how your life has transitioned to where you are now, and what your foxhole looks like now. I know when we spoke a few weeks ago, you were telling me a little bit about sitting somewhere along looking at the mountain range. I don't know if that's at your place or somebody else's, but along Skyline Drive. So I know you're gathering with other men, and tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I have a number of groups that one of the most cherished to me, we call ourselves the Inklings. And so they were after C.S. Lewis and J.R. Tolkien. And they met at Oxford in a bar called the Eagle and the Child. And so that's where all their writings came from. So they would have a pint and they would have their pipes and they would smoke and drink and they would read to each other what they were writing. And then these guys honed each other's skills. So you can actually buy a book on the Inklings, and they talk about how they helped each other write their own stories, And so we have a group of guys, we call ourselves the Inklings, and we show up and we do life together. And so we have a cigar, or some guys bring their pipes, and we make it a very comfortable place for guys. We have a fire. This particular house overlooks the Blue Ridge Parkway, so it's just stunningly beautiful place. So when guys come out, their mouths are dropped open. It's just a beautiful, it's a very masculine environment. Right?
Amazing.
And so I love creating environments where a man feels at home. That's number one, just a good environment where he feels at home.
Sure.
And like we were talking about with story, Mark, the stories are going to be as honest as the guy leading it.
Yep.
If the guy leading it is totally honest with his life, then those stories are going to start to be really honest in that group, right?
That's right.
And so it takes a while to establish that, but we've been doing this for about, over 10 years now. We've been meeting like this. And so, what we found is that not only does a guy need help finding out what his calling is and what he's supposed to do next, but then he needs help to go do it.
Yeah.
And it takes a team. It does. It takes a team of guys. And so we've done that for each other. We've helped each other along the journey, find out what your calling is, and then help you to go do that. And so when we get together, we're not we're not in the way of accountability as far as trying to keep each other from sinning. I get that. What we get together and do is look for the glory in each other's lives and try to set him free into the glory of his life.
So awesome.
Yeah, beautiful.
I love it.
How often do you meet the Inklings?
We meet once a week, but we meet all the time in between. They're showing up in 2 hours from now. They want to hear about my trip from England. So we'll be on my back deck in a couple hours. But I also have a couple of other men's groups I'm involved in, and a really beautiful dinner group with my wife, with 5 other couples that we meet every week also.
Wow.
So the meeting life is very, very vibrant. But I would consider myself more of an elder on the loose. I'm not really tied in with any particular church. And I love being an elder on the loose because it's sort of like when you were playing football, there were the linebackers, then there's the safeties behind you. But I was always the middleman. So the middleman only had to cover the third guy out of the backfield, offensive field. And so that never happened. At most, I'd only send 2 guys out. So I was the guy that was always able to read what was happening on the offense and then attack, And I love being that kind of guy in the kingdom where I can just put my ear to the ground and listen to where the trouble is, run in, be of assistance, and then pack up and leave,
Sure. I love it. Love the apostleship. That's awesome. Wow. I love, the vibrancy of the meeting rhythms sounds awesome. And, love the idea and the picture of, the 5 couples getting together, regularly and doing life together. That is so beautiful. What's next for you, Jeff? What's on the horizon for you and your wife, your family?
I'm on the journey just like everybody else, so we could talk about story, desire, and journey all you want, but eventually it comes down to you got to go out there and do it, and you got to take that risk to venture out. I often feel like I'm in way over my head with these kind of destinations I'm having to fly to now. Because I give you for instance, we went down to the Galapagos, recently, and so you got to find this little island out in the middle of the Pacific, right? Off the coast of Ecuador, right?
Wild.
I'm in a little business jet, right? And so we find this island. And I am just so excited we found the island, right? I am living in it. And the guy I'm flying with is a certified diver, right? And so he wants to go diving with the sharks. And I'm like, hey, listen, Josh, I said, go for it, bro. I'm not certified, but, don't let me keep you back. So he goes, well, why don't we just go to the dive shop together? And I go to the dive shop and they go, hey, listen, we have a 25-foot dive with colorful fish. And then we have a 90-foot dive with the sharks. We'll let Josh go with the sharks, and you can have a 25-foot dive with colorful fish. And I'm like, sounds great to me. I could do that. So we get on the boat. There's probably about 12 of us. And the instructor comes out, and he's telling us about this dive coming up. And I realize as he's giving these instructions that, hey, man, I don't hear anything about 25-foot colorful dive. Also, I'm hearing this 90-foot with the sharks. So I raise my hand and I go, are there anybody else for the 25-foot colorful fish dive? And there's nobody on the boat. He looks around, he's petrified that, I'm not certified, right? He goes, oh my gosh. And so basically they certified me in about 15 minutes on the boat. And they go, you're going with us, right? And so they walk me down to 90 feet. And I go all the way down there, and all of a sudden, as soon as I hit the bottom, a shark that is 3 times my size comes right by us and is looking at me, right? So I'm in a situation where I can't get out of this, right? I can't just swim up to the top now and jump back on the boat. I would never make it if this equipment didn't work, and it's dangerous down here, And so the instructor, all of a sudden, he takes his arm and he opens up a circle on his hip. And I'm like, what kind of signal is that? He hadn't told me about that. And he takes my arm and he puts it through his arm. And he just coasts with me on the bottom of this ocean with the sharks. And I'm arm in arm with him. Now, I can't remember the last time I took a guy's arm, but I took Hector's arm that day, man.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, sure. I'll swim with you, but But when he opened up his arm, it was a picture of God.
Mm.
I mean, it was like, okay, when you're at your wit's end and you don't know what to do anymore, I got you, little guy. I got you. And that's what the Lord's been saying to me over and over again. You just keep going beyond your maps. You just keep going and taking those risks, and I got you.
Wow. Well,
And,
I love it, man. Thank you for sharing that story. That is a powerful one. And we often talk, Mark and I, about accelerating into retirement. And that's all I hear from you. I mean, you're just full of energy and enthusiasm for what God has been doing, is doing, and is going to continue to do. And
it's been a great ride.
And it's exciting. And here you go, just accelerating for more,
Yeah, it's beautiful. A couple things come to mind just listening to you. First is I'd love to have seen your blood pressure and heart rate at the time of the passing shark, right. Where you look down at your wrist and you're like, oh baby.
Oh yeah.
I'm flirting with some numbers here that aren't good when you're at 90 feet. But that aside, it's probably not lost on anyone who's listening. The metaphors that are so tied to Jeff's great at this is painting pictures, and the sharks in our lives, right? The enemy is swimming by all the time, every day, moment to moment, in many cases. I know for me, the drift, we talk about the drift here, Jeff, all the time. It's, we're on focus, we're on mission, we're doing good. And all of a sudden, it could be yoga pants, it could be something on TV, it could be anything that causes me to drift. And then someone comes along and makes a circle on their hip and locks arms with you.
Yeah.
And there's the magic of the foxhole metaphor.
Yeah.
Is that we are just not. The Bible tells us clearly we're not meant to do this journey on our own. And it's good.
Amen.
It's good if you're at ground level. It's good if you're up at 35,000 feet in cruising altitude. And it's good if you're 90 feet underneath the water.
Amen.
The same analysis, the same rules apply.
Yeah.
Mark, that is absolutely spot on. And so I'm gonna add to that, and I'm gonna answer Sarge's question about what's your foxhole like. So when you come in and land in the 757, you have to, before your next leg, you have to shut down the computers on board the airplane. And what you're going to do is shut them down, let it sit, reset, and then you turn them back on. And when you turn those computers back on, the airplane has to be completely still for 10 minutes. Because what it's doing is it's looking for true north. Okay, it needs to find true north, so you can't move the airplane. It'll find true north by itself.
Yep.
And what it's doing on that reset is getting rid of all the drift. It's getting rid of the airspeed errors, the altitude errors, any computer errors. It's dumping those to find out what true north is. Because if you take off without doing that, you're already going to have drift built in to the system, and you can be dangerously off course. And so that's what a foxhole does for me, Sarge, is it helps me to orient me back to true north.
Yeah. Amen.
Love that.
It resets me.
Absolutely.
And I can't live without these guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jeff, how about you've got to sit still for 10 minutes? I don't know about you. Short of sleeping, I don't do that very often.
Yeah, you could have stopped there. Right, exactly. Right. I mean, that's let's just start with that. Right? Yeah. Tell me how to do that.
Right. We have an episode. We have an episode called "A Bias for Action," and it's a love story of the fact that God made both Sarge and I as action-oriented humans. We're human
and
doings.
Sounds like Jeff as well.
Yeah, we're human doings.
Yeah.
Oh, we're men of action. We're men of action. Totally.
Yeah.
So we practiced this morning. So here's how I pray with my wife now. She takes a scripture, she reads it, and then I have to sit there in silence for 15 minutes. It's an eternity.
Wow.
Okay. So I have to sit for 15 minutes and listen to what God might say.
Wow.
And so she says, she's so beautiful because she's like, okay, it's okay. You got distracted because it's a practice. She's really generous with me,
I love it.
But getting us to, and that was the beautiful thing about going down to 90 feet, actually. because all the storms are up there on the surface at 90 feet. It was as calm as can be, even though there were sharks, man. It was, and so how do we plumb the depths, get out of the shallows and go down into the depths with God and to hear from him, right?
Amen. Amen. Beautiful. Just beautiful. Well, brother, we thank you. Thank you for sharing a bit of your story and your journey with us and the many foxholes that you're a part of. And we pray that God would continue to use you as he's been doing, and use your story and your gift of storytelling and your love of history, for his glory and his purposes. And next time Mark and I are down near the Blue Ridge Mountains, I'm gonna give you a jingle, see if we can stop by the Inklings.
The vineyards down here are amazing. You would love we'll take care of you. But actually, we're going to pop up there first. So we're taking the Airstream this year to Prince Edward Island and Nova Scotia. And so
awesome.
We actually have to go through New Jersey. So I'm looking at a campground close to you guys, so we can pop in for the night.
Hopefully you're doing that in August or September, because it'll be
We're doing it in July and August.
Oh, that's perfect. That's perfect.
Yep.
Well, give us a ring for sure. Maybe we'll have to hit Yankee Stadium. I know that's been on your list to get to Yankee Stadium. So
definitely.
We'll maybe try and get to a game. That would be fun. This could be the year. Wow. This could be it.
Yeah, this could be the year. I know. How many years since the new stadium, and I still haven't been there?
Oh, my Lord.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
We can remedy that.
So I did get to see him when I was when I went down to St. Petersburg, right?
Yes.
And that's when I was talking to you. And by the way, Sarge, I went out to Anna Maria Island after you suggested it. And it was stunningly beautiful. My gosh.
Isn't that great sand? That's some of the greatest sand.
Yeah,
People don't know that story. We love Anna Maria.
Mark's been there too. Yeah. It's a great spot.
That's talcum powder.
That was such a beautiful. So anyway, I had to fly the boss in, and we fly him in, and these little FBOs are so beautiful where that we work with. They're the fixed base operators at the airport. They're very professional. So they bring the car out right to the airplane for the boss, and we get him on his way. And so the other guy I'm flying with, Lee, he's going to go see his parents that he hasn't seen in like a year. And I'm like, Lee, you just take off, go. I'll close up the airplane and everything. And so I'm closing up the airplane, and lo and behold, they bring my rental car out to the jet. I walk off the jet, I get in a rental car, and I go see the Yankees play at George Steinbrenner's field in Tampa.
Oh, I love it.
And I'm driving there, and I'm thinking to myself, Jeff, this isn't real, man. That's not your jet. You're just hired help here, okay? You could be gone tomorrow, man. This isn't real. But it was so cool to go to George Steinbrenner Field because I've watched the Yankees lose so many times on TV. It was good to see him lose in person.
That's a cool little park. That's a great little great little park.
I totally enjoy it.
Well, please, we'd love to have you, and thank you again. Thanks for taking the time to be with us today in the Foxhole. It's been great. It's been great.
You guys do it, man. Keep it up, man. I love it.
Thank you, Jeff. God bless you.
Thank you. God bless you. And thank you for listening to the Foxhole Symphony podcast. We appreciate you tuning in, and be sure to share it with others, and we'll talk soon.
Peace.